This is part 2 of a two-part series. If you missed part 1, here's a quick recap.
Hello! Dog! Can't see it.
I did say it would be a quick recap. Our second day began in the sunny seaside town of Ryde, overlooking Portsmouth on the other side of the Solent. We'd arrived here on the island by ferry, but my travelling companion was about to discover that our transfer off this fair isle was rather less pedestrian.
We're just about to board our first mode of transport of day 2. If you'd like to look to your left, sir.
Would I?
Oh, you would? You're going on a hovercraft, my friend.
Oh my god.
Yes, I said that we wouldn't be using any planes or helicopters on this trip, but I didn't specifically rule out flying. The first modern hovercraft was invented by Christopher Cockerell in the 1950s, and this part of the world really is its spiritual home. The first hovercraft crossed the English Channel in 1959, 50 years to the day after Louis Blériot made the first successful crossing in an aeroplane, and it's the only place where they've really ever seen sustained successful commercial operation. Famously, the gargantuan SRN-4 hovercraft used to carry up to 250 passengers and 30 cars from Kent to the continent, until the British and French governments put a channel tunnel-shaped hole in their business model, and the last remaining example of these is preserved just over the water from us at the Hovercraft Museum in Lee-on-Solent. Cockerell himself lived for most of his life in nearby Hythe, Hampshire, and might have been heartened to know that whilst the last cross-channel hovercraft were withdrawn a few months after his death, this single hover connection between Ryde and Portsmouth remains in service to this day. At the time of filming, it had the distinction of being the only regularly scheduled hovercraft route in the world, but as of July 2025, a new hovercraft service links the Japanese city of Oita with its airport, perhaps heralding a small revival for this wonderful technology. Or perhaps that's just wishful thinking. Either way, my travelling companion and I boarded our own little Concorde of the Sea, which glided across the slipway and out into the Solent. Admittedly, there were some drawbacks to the design. It was very loud inside, and the ride was comically bumpy despite floating over a cushion of air on a very calm sea. The windows were also filthy, but through the grime we could just about make out Southsea Beach in Portsmouth hove into view as our hovercraft came into land. We disembarked, and our next mode of transport was waiting patiently for us outside.
Now time for the most exciting transfer of all time, hovercraft to hover bus.
Whoa!
Yeah! It's just a bus.
Our hover bus, as the council optimistically likes to market it, took us from the beach to Portsmouth's central bus station, where we had a great view of two of the city's most famous landmarks.
There's the Victory.
The Titanic.
There's the Spinnaker Tower. And
Spinach Tower?
That's the one.
Yeah.
As a Southamptonite, or Sotonian, who has gone on the record as rather liking my hometown, see my other work for proof of this, I feel obligated to put in a cheap joke about Portsmouth being a filth-ridden den of iniquity and cultural desert, but honestly, this isn't true. The waterfront with its historic dockyard, beach and dramatic tower is lovely, and makes for a great day out. That said, there is something about Portsmouth that drives great people away. This is the birthplace of Charles Dickens, Peter Sellers and Isambard Kingdom Brunel, but all of them left the city as young children. We are following in the footsteps of those titans of literature, cinema and industry by leaving Portsmouth as fast as possible. Our onward connection was on a coach, undoubtedly one of Britain's most underappreciated modes of public transport. Coaches often fill in the vital gaps that trains don't cover in the British transport system and provide an invaluable low-cost alternative to rail travel, and yet they're run entirely at the whim of private operators. On this journey, the coach, a brand new and comfortable vehicle, even saved us time as it sped north off of Portsea Island and inland up the M3. The coach was bound for London, but we alighted before it reached the heart of the metropolis, which caused my companion some confusion.
So we just got off our coach and arrived at Heathrow Terminal 5. I've told Aaron we're not going on a plane. There's
But you
no
lied.
plane involved.
You lied.
No. Let's see. This is the bit I'm least sure about whether or not it will work. Okay, quick walk through a car park, along a corridor. Okay, so we're coming up to the next road of public transport. Just around this corner.
What the fuck is Wait, no, you can't use that.
No, you can't. What do you mean, no, you can't use that? We're going to find out if we can.
Yes, we were about to ride what was probably the most esoteric and definitely the most ridiculous mode of public transport of our entire journey, the Heathrow pods. These individual autonomous vehicles have been shuttling passengers on the mammoth journey between Heathrow Terminal 5 and a random car park just outside Heathrow Terminal 5 since 2011. Officially known as Ultra or Urban Light Transit, these little capsules afforded us some great views of Europe's busiest airports as they trundled by. Weirdly, these are some of the only vehicles in the whole country which drive on the right rather than the left. Perhaps it's the confusing feeling of international transitoriness that airports engender. We arrived at the car park where we discovered that we may have broken one or two rules to get there before turning around and heading back. However, as our pod approached the terminal, we heard a worrying announcement over the tannoy.
Okay, Aaron, do you just want to explain what we just heard over this little radio here?
So, they told us, but sorry, it stopped. It's just gonna take a couple of seconds. They just told us now that but very sorry, we're gonna have to get some technicians down. But we're trapped here for the next 5 to 10 minutes.
We're just stuck in the pod. I mean, there's more opportunities for plane spotting, but it does. I love driverless technology. It is excellent.
So just to let you know, if you're planning on taking the Heathrow pod, if you're ever in Heathrow Airport, there's a 50% chance for this to happen.
It's true.
Based on our 2 trips.
50% of all journeys do end in technicians clawing the doors open with a hammer.
So, with a queue of high-tech autonomous robopods forming behind us, a lovely man with a crowbar came to our rescue. Our knight in shining high-vis ushered us through a series of passageways and security doors before we emerged, blinking in the daylight but glad to finally be free. If this really is what the future looks like, then the present has never looked so good. For our onward journey, London was beckoning, but our trip worked best if we departed from Terminals 2 and 3, so we hopped on a Heathrow Express train to take the short hop in style. Cheeky free transfer between terminals, and because it's free, we're sat in business class.
How much would it cost if we don't get off at the next stop?
Approximately £8,000.
Our connecting train into the heart of the capital was on London's newest and purplest form of transport, the Elizabeth line. Opening in 2022, it has already shuttled nearly 250 million lucky passengers to such exotic far-flung destinations as Reading, Shenfield and Slough. It's more akin to the Parisian RER than any existing London tube line in its operations and rolling stock, and that rolling stock is certainly significantly more luxurious than the 50-year-old zombies that haunt the tunnels of the Bakerloo line to this day. For the avoidance of doubt, however, we're not classing this as a separate mode of public transport. It is, at its core, fundamentally still just a train. We disembarked in a part of London that was new to me, and fairly new just generally, Stratford's Olympic Legacy Park. It's undoubtedly a nice place this, especially on a sunny day, even with the strange twisted shape of Anish Kapoor's Orbit Tower looming over us. However, there was no time for sightseeing because we had more transport to catch before the day was out, so we dove back into the station and hopped on the tube's futuristic cousin, the Docklands Light Railway. Opening in 1987, the network is well used and has significantly expanded to include a plethora of increasingly ridiculously named places. I, for one, refuse to believe that places called King George V and Mudchute really exist, and while I'm sure that Cyprus and East India are real places, I was under the impression that I'd have to travel further afield than East London to reach them. Undoubtedly the best feature of the DLR, however, might be the fact that these autonomous people movers have windows at the front and back, so if you get the right seat, you can pretend to be the driver. We alighted at Royal Victoria and started to walk south. Unfortunately, our progress was soon impeded by a rather large river, but fortunately London had thought of that and provided a solution: a cable car.
Haven't we already done this one?
No, legally different. Absolutely. There's totally different from a chairlift, and I don't know what you're talking about. Let's go.
Okay, so the difference between a cable car and a chairlift isn't that huge, but if I decided that they were the same thing and not bothered to ride it, you wouldn't get to see this cool bit of footage, so you be the judge. I could fill this segment with some sarcastic comments about the whole thing being a huge white elephant concocted by Mayor Boris Johnson, or how the number of daily commuters on the line was recorded to be a grand total of 4 when it first opened, but sitting in the gondola, I don't care about any of that. I'm just enjoying the view. And now you can too with this cable car montage. Having ogled London from above for pretty much the entire journey, the cable car deposited us on the south side of the Thames in North Greenwich, more or less bang on the Greenwich Meridian, which splits the world in half with the kind of fastidious dedication to straight lines and complete disregard for the borders of other countries that Britain in the 19th century was so famous for. We crossed back into the Western Hemisphere and eschewed the bright light of day to go deep, deep underground to ride, funnily enough, the Underground. London's metro, the first in the world, has become completely synonymous with the city, and with some snazzy branding and Harry Beck's diagrammatic map making, has revolutionised the way Londoners move around their city. The first Underground line opened in 1863 and was powered by steam, which is astonishing to imagine given the cramped nature of the tunnels, but unfortunately the passenger experience really hasn't improved much since then. The trains still rattle and scream like banshees as they navigate the aged tracks, and can reach faintly ridiculous temperatures, especially on a hot day like today, when the temperatures were well above the legal limits for transporting cattle. Our subterranean trip was mercifully brief as we emerged from the darkness into what was, for many years, London's busiest station, Waterloo. Our odyssey was nearly at its end now, and the excitement was palpable. We'd nearly conquered every mode of public transport that Britain had to throw at us. We hopped on a quick commuter train to Wimbledon and changed platforms to find our final ride of the day waiting for us.
The final mode. Excitement mounts. Our journey is almost at an end. And we're on.
Yes, the last leg of our momentous journey was to be on the humble tram. London's tram network is often forgotten as it does not trouble the inner city, but forms vital links between parts of South London where the tube does not dare to tread. We watched the handsome terraces of Wimbledon swish by before alighting for the final time and reflecting on the mammoth journey we had just undertaken.
Wow. Okay, that was it. 2 days, countless forms of public transport. In this moment, give us your thoughts. How are you feeling?
The UK transport industry has
Okay, basically what he's trying to say is that doing this trip with me was a joy beyond words, that my continued company for 48 hours was an effortless delight, and that he'd gladly do it again in a heartbeat. So there you go, it was a success. Our journey was complete, but before I leave you to get on with your lives, it's time for some stats. We rode 12 modes of public transport, excluding that pesky land train from part 1, a funicular, a train, a ferry, a bus, a chairlift, a hovercraft, a coach, a pod, a people mover, a cable car, a metro and a tram. The total cost of our trip was £101.90, with some modes of transport providing better value for money than others. Beyond the Heathrow pods, which were completely free, the cheapest mode of transport was the coach, which cost just 20 pence per mile to ride, whilst the funicular railway in Southbourne cost us £110 per mile. At those prices, a journey between London and Edinburgh would cost well over £36,000. At this point, I'd love to leave you with a poignant conclusion about what we've learned from our great odyssey of transit, but to be honest, I don't have one. It was supremely pointless, but great fun. A motto to live by, I think. Goodbye.